Okay, good day, everyone. Kaila kun, dobry din. As in the case around the world, there is a difficult balance between government encouraging investors and also considering its own state requirements. So today it's a great pleasure to introduce you to this webinar titled Kazakhstan's Government Mining Policy and Impacts, which is very timely on this subject. We have a great panel and moderator, all who are very, very close to the subject. Three housekeeping items. The webinar will be video recorded and available on the BKS website after the event. There is a language channel button at the base of your screens. Choose Russian or English. Also, there's a Q&A feature at the base of your screen to ask the panel and moderator questions. So also to welcome you to this event, Assel Zhanbulatova, Minerals Lead in the UK Department of Business and Trade in Astana, our partner in these events. Over to you, Assel.
Thank you, David. Dear panel guests, panel speakers, it's a pleasure to join you today for this important topic of strategic importance for both Kazakhstan and the global economy. So mining is one of the cornerstone industries for Kazakhstan. It plays a critical role in driving growth, creating jobs, supporting industrial development. For this reason, it's essential that the government works hand in hand with industry leaders and international partners to strengthen mining policies and regulations. So critical minerals have emerged as a foundational sector for the United Kingdom. They underpin growth and security across 8 priority sectors identified in the UK industrial strategy, from advanced manufacturing to clean energy technologies. Recognizing this, the UK is committed to working closely with the governments in the region to improve governance, enhance transparency, and build resilience in the critical minerals sector. Today, I would like to briefly highlight 2 key initiatives where the UK is actively engaged. First, we are working together with the government of Kazakhstan through Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, EITI. This initiative sets a high bar for transparency and citizen engagement in the extractive sector, and we work with the government of Kazakhstan to maintain that. Many firms in Kazakhstan already comply with EITI standards, which is commendable. However, firm-level compliance is only one part of the equation. So full EITI compliance requires broader systematic improvements, and this is where UK collaborate with Kazakhstan government in strengthening these dimensions. Secondly, Central Asian regional level, we are working with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, to advance mining governance. This collaboration brings OECD expertise to Kazakhstan to address these 3 critical areas. First is taxation and fiscal transparency, responsible business conduct, and third, environmental risk management. So these efforts not only benefit Kazakhstan, but also create opportunities for knowledge sharing with neighboring countries such as Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, particularly in tackling challenges like tax evasion in the mining sector. So this collective work is more than just compliance. It's about attracting investment and ensuring that mining contributes to sustainable and exclusive growth. So thank you very much, and I look forward to an engaging discussion. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Assel. And today we're especially delighted to have Olga Petrova as moderator. Olga is very close to the industry, having worked with Rio Tinto over 10 years, and is currently the company's general manager in Kazakhstan, based in Almaty. Over to you, Olga.
Thanks, David. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm honored to serve as your moderator for this important session, and thank you everyone for joining us for this for what's promised to be a very insightful discussion today. Kazakhstan mining sector, as Assel mentioned, and everyone, is essential to the national economy and a very important link in global supply chains. The 2017 mining reform, through the introduction of the mining code and related regulations, marked a really turning point attracting significant amount of foreign investment into the country and energizing the local exploration and mining market. For several years, this created a very positive dynamic and valuable learning curve for everyone in the industry, including companies and governments as well. And as companies assess market attractiveness based not only the technical factors, they look at stability, transparency, and predictability. In this context, recent policy developments, particularly in taxation and regulation, shaping the future of investment and worldwide competitiveness of Kazakhstani mining sector, or challenges actually. Today, our panelists will share their perspectives on this change and what they mean, this change mean for businesses, investors, and the broader economic landscape in country and beyond. After their insights, we will open the floor for your questions during the dedicated Q&A session. Our goal today is to provide clarity or try to provide some clarity where it's possible, encourage dialogue, and help stakeholders navigate an evolving policy environment. Thank you for being with us. So let's get started. And the first speaker is Almat Daumov, partner of legal firm GRATA, who has extensive experience in taxation, transfer pricing, investment, subsoil use, and litigation. Almat will provide his view on how new tax regulations are influencing investment and operating environment in general, and project costs and profitability in particular in the mining sector of Kazakhstan. Almat, the floor is yours.
Thank you, dear Olga. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. And I also would like to express my gratitude to the organizers of today's event, to British-Kazakh Society for the opportunity to speak at this webinar and share our views with participants from the mining sector. Well, my presentation starts with first part related to the tax changes that, in our opinion, will affect Kazakhstan mining sector starting from the next year. And second part of my presentation, during second part of my presentation, I would like to brief you about land-related issues which we suppose affect investors in Kazakhstan. Well, if we go, we wanted to brief you up on the in 2 slides about what to expect starting from 1st January next year. Number one change is significant increase in tax burden on the rental payments for subsoil blocks, which affects exploration companies mostly. And we noticed that for the license holders, for the licenses with more than 70 blocks, the tax burden increases 2 times, and even in case if it's more than 120 blocks, it increases even more than 2.5 times. Similarly, during the subsequent periods, I mean exploration period, year number 4, 5, and 6, and further, burden the rates, applicable rates increases again like by 1.5 times, 2 times, and more, depending on the number of blocks. On one hand, we understand the position and Kazakhstan government's intention to limit accumulation and so-called long-term parking of large number of blocks by explorers. But on the other hand, our concern is whether or not this may stimulate investors to acquire or to apply for like small or insignificant number of blocks licenses, even though we all understand that from geological exploration perspective, the larger the smaller the area, the smaller the chance that explorer may discover a major deposit. That's why we can summarize that as a result of this increase, the high quality investors, mostly high quality investors, will get bigger tax burden, and it may effectively push some of them toward acquiring smaller exploration areas. The second, we can switch to the second slide. Yeah, the second part of tax reforms related to mineral exploration tax and to royalties. With regards to mineral exploration, mineral extraction tax, so-called NDPE, mineral extraction tax, we all remember, I think, from recent years that in 2023, MET rates have been increased for 50% for the metals, the ordinary metals. And just 2 years passed, and now we see another increase, but with regards to gold. The new tax code introduced bigger tax burden. The rates will range from 7.2% of MET for gold up to 11% depending on the gold price. Well, we simply we understand the position of Kazakh government. Understandable that they would like to get extra taxes from extra profit, which now gold mining companies have in the due to the high prices for gold. But the principle in total, I mean, the unexpected and situational changes in tax rates, in tax legislation, in tax regime may in general affect investment climate and negatively affect investment climate. And mining projects, they're not planned for 3, 5, or 7 years. They are planned for decades, yeah, for 15, 20, and more years. And frequent tax changes may reduce investors' appetite or confidence in the jurisdiction. And if we even discuss this increase in MET rates with regards to gold, from one point it's understandable capturing this additional revenue, but from other standpoint, there's still like risky projects in gold mining with, let's say, low grades gold ores or a high operational cost. And this kind of projects will be still like impacted negatively by increase of MET rates. Another reform in mineral extraction tax is related to the tailings, or so-called technogenic mineral formations. And this is positively accepted by the whole mining industry. Government decided to decrease the applicable rate of mineral extraction tax in case if you mine or extract solid minerals from tailings, from these TMFs, and it's essentially it gives us, like, from one hand, government solves this long-term problem with liquidation of subsoil use activity, mining activity made during, like, I don't know, last 20, 30, 40, 50 years. On the other hand, drop this 10%, 10 times drop in MET rates makes this reprocessing of waste, mining waste, let's say, economically viable. On the other hand, it gives like extra tax payments to state budget and attracting this remaining, let's say, metal reserves in tailings into economy of Kazakhstan. And the last major change, which we also were expecting for many years, starting, I think, from 2010, is adoption of royalty regime for mining industry. Although it's now limited it's now limited and will be available only for those licenses which will be issued for exploration and mining as well from 1st January 2027, but it's big move towards international standards. And also we noticed that we will have like this 2026 to identify and to polish many things which now raise concerns among international investors. And one of the main topic is the proposed rates. Current tax code provides 7% for metals and alloys, and for 10% for concentrates and 13% for ores. And our comparative analysis showed that according to our knowledge, for example, in Australia, the rates seems to us like almost 2 times less than proposed in Kazakhstan, and hopefully we will have this 1 or 2 extra years to talk to Kazakh government and to let them reconsider proposed rates of royalties for the mining industry. This is all about tax policy changes, and let me switch to my last slide, which relates to this land related matters. We also noticed that it seems to us that land issues is almost number 2 in the list of all explorers and mining companies in Kazakhstan, because real access to the land plot where you can drill or where you mine is becoming more and more important in Kazakhstan. We divided this problem into 2 groups. First is exploration explorers, where we identified that in practice for the private company to get servitude over the private land takes from 9 months almost to 2 years, which is quite big delay in case if you consider this 6-year period of first exploration license which can be given by Kazakh government. And secondly, mining companies, they face even more severe problems when they have to acquire whole land rights in case if they switch from exploration period to mining stage. We made a detailed overview of international experience, how it works in Australia, Canada, Mexico, and other jurisdictions. And then I develop solutions. First, briefly, the idea with exploration is to let local Akimats to establish even private servitudes over the even private lands by their special resolution, by so-called public servitude resolution, which this will allow investor to have to have only one paper giving them access to any land in the region, regardless of whether it's occupied or not occupied by private or landowners, because it's just access to make usually quite simple works like drilling, having 1, 2, maximum 10 square meters of the territory, and then you have maybe another 2 or 3 points over the big huge land plot area. And with regards to mining, the problem was that local Akimats were hesitating to acquire land plots for state needs because of lack of local budget and in-front budgeting and all the stuff. Now we developed, we proposed to Kazakh government to establish a practice where, for example, Akimats they can start this compulsory acquiring of land rights in favor of subsoil users, but this compensation will be paid by the subsoil user and not the state. This will allow, I think, everyone to balance this interest. So investor will need to compensate the losses, but Akimat will be hopefully ready to support investors switching from exploration stage to mining. Well, this is all from what we have recently in portfolio of our work, especially in Kazakhstan Chamber of Mines and many other mining associations in Kazakhstan.
Thanks very much, Almat, for your presentation and your detailed overview. That's interesting how, especially on the slides with the land access, it's interesting that for 2 years you could be waiting just to access the land to do the actual work on the ground, but your commitment and actually your expenditure requirement to the government started from day one of the license. Actually have to pay land tax, including and like minimum exploration work there as well, while you actually cannot access the ground for 2 years, but you already have to spend this money somewhere in the air and pay land taxes for the land you cannot access as well. I will save my questions for the Q&A session. Thank you very much, Almat. And we will move on to our next speaker. And I'm honored to invite and introduce Daniel Witt, president of the International Tax and Investment Center, which he co-founded in 1993, with over 35 years of experience in promoting free markets and reducing barriers to tax, trade, and investment across 87 countries, including Kazakhstan. Daniel is recognized as a leading expert in frontier markets worldwide. And today, Daniel will share with us his insights on creating a welcoming tax and regulatory environment to attract mining investment. Daniel, please.
Well, thank you, Olga. Boy, that introduction makes me feel a little bit old. You know, of all those years, 32 of them have been working in Kazakhstan, and it was in those early years I met David. So and it was before this great organization was even born, even before any chambers of commerce. So you were one of the early innovators. So my hat's off to BKS. I mean, you bring together people together to talk about the real issues, but in a friendly environment. It's a friendship society, but you recognize the value of business. So hats off to your innovation and your persistence, because these issues that we talked about 30 plus years ago are still there. I mean, Kazakhstan is competing for capital in the mining sector. And like so many of these things, we are, the macro picture is good. When you get down to some of the micro and what are the investors feeling? And most importantly, what are the prospective investors feeling? There are concerns. It's a little bit troubling. So let me give you a couple of statistics, and also Almat, excellent presentation on tax. You've made my life easy. I can talk about policy and competitiveness. You've talked about the details. I mean, like with any tax reform, there's pluses and minuses. I don't think the new investors would be sad to see the MET disappear, but the royalty rates are a concern. And how do they compare competitively? I always like to see some type of market system put in with sliding, where you can have, there could be upside for both investors and the state when prices go up. So I think those are some mechanisms that I hope will prevail in the negotiations. Also, those types of mechanisms that are not in the new tax code, but hopefully can be in contracts, will be to share some risk, to create a win-win agreement between Kazakhstan and new investors in the mining sector that align investments, that align incentives. It's very important. So let me throw out these two statistics to kind of paint a picture. And the first picture is pretty darn good. You look at the IMD out of Lausanne, Switzerland, their World Competitiveness Report in 2025. Of course, like all indexes, it uses data from the year before. Kazakhstan is number 34 in the world out of 69 jurisdictions. They climbed 1 point last year. They were using 23 data. The report was 34. Not a big step, but they held steady with a little improvement. And remember, back in the early days of independence, President Nazarbayev, with his 5-year plan, 10-year plan, I think there was a 2030 plan, that they wanted to be in the top 50 most competitive countries of the world. Well, they've arrived, but the world is competitive. The region is competitive. The minerals investment opportunities are competitive, so they've got to do better. So let's dig a little bit deeper, since we're here talking about mining. Out of Canada, the Fraser Institute, really it's perhaps the most recognized index, the annual survey of mining companies in 2024. And I want to share 2 statistics. One is the Investment Attractiveness Index. And this is a score. 100 is perfect. And the best in class is Finland. And I'm not going to get into the methodology, but again, Fraser Institute annual survey of mining companies. If people want to Google it, look it up. They weight this. There's 2 things. One, the 60% of it's based on geology. Kazakhstan is strong on geology. But the second one is based you have in the ground, 40 on the government rules. And Kazakhstan came in 59. They fell, 36. Excuse me. They were at 36 the year before, which really, if you think about us as students, 36 is a failing grade. 59 is just barely passing. So there's still room to grow. And much of this, I think all of that is determined by things the governments control. And then, so that is the absolute score, with Finland being having 100%. In terms of the jurisdictions surveyed, where do they rank? There were 82 countries surveyed. Kazakhstan has climbed from 79 in year 2023, and they're now at 43. Again, 1 being the best. 1 is Finland to last year. But in the elements, what do they consider with the PPI, which is Policy Perception Index? Many of the same things that Almat talked about, with the taxation regime being very important, but also it's the administration. You can have good words on paper, but it doesn't seem real clear the rights, responsibility, and the authorizations, the powers to grant mineral rights, whether it's in a Akim or does that go to the center? So I think in the mining business, again, while I'm a firm believer what's in the ground is owned by the people of Kazakhstan, but there ought to be well-respected property rights for the fixed term of a contract. And I can think of the 1990s, those were real issues that investors the international investors were very nervous about Kazakhstan. And I think that explains why we don't have large-scale mining projects from the big mining companies of the world in Kazakhstan. I'm happy they're back. I'm happy that there's exploration. But when you think about where the oil and gas industry is today, how that's been an engine to growing and developing Kazakhstan, to improving the quality of life for the people, it's because Kazakhstan was open for business for the oil and gas companies, the international companies, the best in the world companies, and they created a stable, predictable fiscal and regulatory regime. Of course, there's been fighting at the edges on taxes, transfer pricing. We continue to hear about the fights with environmental regulations being a mechanism to extract more revenues? Is it about money or is it about protecting the environment? There's different ways to do it if you really are concerned about the environment. And let's be really candid here. It's easy to get lost in the details, but that's what a lawyer is paid to do. And there's a lot of details, but the tax system is fundamentally about sharing the money between an investor that's on the front edge of making a decision to commit billions of dollars over 30 to 40 years, large scale investments. And how are they going to share the money with the state? And it should be done in a stable, predictable, and transparent way, and a competitive way. The companies that are interested in Kazakhstan and should be in Kazakhstan, they are willing to pay competitive taxes. Most importantly, they are willing to fulfill all of their legal obligations. The compliance risks with the multinational mining companies are considerably lower than the smaller companies that we see around Africa and in Southeast Asia. The big houses comply. But what can the government do to make it simple and easy? And it's still a very complex regime. The tax administration is still too difficult. It's still too difficult to get VAT refunds. When you think about the large-scale capital investment to develop a mining project, you cannot have the VAT turn into a de facto tax on investment. And with a currency that has been it has not been as stable as I know our dear friends at the National Bank of Kazakhstan would like, that really turns into a de facto tax. So timely VAT refunds, or are there some mechanisms that with recognizing it could be abused, but could there be ways that the large projects could have their upfront capital investment exempt from VAT, which is really just a timing issue? So let's look at it. That's really the eyes of the investors. But let's look at it through the eyes of the Kazakhstan government. They want investment. We hear this. That was one of the big headlines when President Tokayev was meeting with President Trump last week. I'm in Kazakhstan 6 times a year. You look at how this is the top priority of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, investment promotion. You listen to Byturick, you listen to Kazinvest, investment. But at the same time, the interest from the mining companies is still disappointing. And that's really and I think largely it's the uncertainty, the investor uncertainty. And I think first and foremost, it's around the tax regime, the law, and the administration, which really is, again, let's put it in the simplest terms. How do you share the money? How do you share the risk? Yes, Kazakhstan has spent money on geological surveys as a state, but that's peanuts compared to what you're looking to do large-scale, comprehensive exploration and the massive amounts of money to develop a project. So I think about what was done in the early to mid-90s when I met David. What did it take for British Gas, his former company, to make a commitment? And you were the first, David. The political risk was much higher in 1995 than it is today. Happily, the political risk in Kazakhstan is a lot lower. But the policy risk, the tax risk, some of the property rights risks are still way too high for a mature country that is celebrating its 34th anniversary of independence in December. So they need new licenses need to be issued, but Kazakhstan needs to understand they are competing for capital. We look at Australia. We look at, for rare, and I know we're going to have another session on rare earth and critical minerals, but you've got places like Myanmar, Indonesia. There's a lot of competition that are close to seaports. You've got railroads being built in Zambia from DRC, over to Angola, the Lobito corridor. So Kazakhstan needs to realize they are competing. Secondly, they need to share the risk, at least some of the timing risk. The big payday shouldn't come on day one for a government, because we know for a mining company, your payday, you don't start to feel it positively till 7, 8, realistically 10 years. Again, how can the alignment of incentives be further strengthened? So while the macro statistics are good, climbing from 79 to 43 in the rankings, that's good, but that hasn't resulted in new projects being initiated. There is an appetite. I mean, you think about it. What really disappoints me, you've got fantastic geology in Kazakhstan. The resources are there. The global demand, in my lifetime, for what's in the ground in Kazakhstan, copper, iron ore, of course, the rare earth, it's never been, and of course, uranium, as you think about countries like United States, and I hope some in Europe are waking up to a nuclear renaissance for electricity generation. The demand has never been greater in my lifetime, but yet the investors are not beating the door down in Kazakhstan. So I'm optimistic because I've seen the way Kazakhstan clearly said, we're open for business in the oil and gas sector. That type of commitment backed up with the soft infrastructure, which is tax, legal, regulatory, property right guarantees, that needs to be built to match the geography. And I think there is a potential bonanza waiting for Kazakhstan in the mining sector. And it's not just exploration and production. We really need Kazakhstan to look at how could it leapfrog other countries that have seaports or railroads to seaports. What can Kazakhstan do on processing? Processing has been an even bigger disappointment, and that's what the world needs. That's what, again, it's the British-Kazakh society, but I'm from the United States. That's what America needs. And you think about the geopolitical side of it, the tether that unites Kazakhstan in the West. We don't share borders, but it's the economic relations, starting with the kind of things David Skeels did with British Gas, being in there as one of the first large-scale investors. If we can take that to copper, uranium, critical minerals, and process it, Kazakhstan would be in a league of the biggest and the best. And that's my wish, and that is my commitment, and I trust everyone on this call to work with the government to put in place. We're not suggesting you give it away. The oil and gas was not given away. They were competitive contracts based on best practices and based on the political risk at the time. Would you give those same terms today? No. But the risks were a lot higher then than they are today. But at the end of the day, they were competitive. Kazakhstan won the competition for capital, and I hope through our work together with the government, we can help Kazakhstan win the competition for your capital investment in the mining sector.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I feel like I should stand and clap actually for under
no.
each sentence you have said, really. And you have been referring to David and the company he was at the time. So I'm representative for 318, and we're actually in country for more than 20 years. And we were here before the modern legislation were brought in place, because we saw that at that time that the trend in the reforms and the government, what the government was saying in the reforms which were slowly being introduced and the actions the government was implementing in the ministry, they were consistent with what they were saying, and we could see slowly, yes, but there were those changes, and finally then the mining code was introduced. But while we were active even with projects before the mining code introduction, the worrying thing, yes, we can confirm as an investor that the trend is now going back. Actually, the government continue saying engaging in and working on getting in more investment and promoting more investment in the country, while the action in-house actually a little different. Those short-term wins from the tax regime at the moment, like increasing now for us explorers, for example, like if we take that as an example, increasing our land access to do the work, sounds like a punishment and very short-term win at the moment, while the long-term losses are not considered in this case. So thank you very much, Daniel, and I'm honored to invite our third speaker, last but not least, Timur Odilov, who exactly what we are talking about at the moment, and from what the government has been doing for the last couple of decades, actually from the legislation perspective. So hopefully Timur in his speech will address that. Timur is a partner at law firm Lomax. Timur has been one of the key contributors to the development of the of Kazakhstan mining reforms, and actively involved in development and promoting of the mining code at the time and its implementation up until 2023. So he also participated in shaping the environmental code in 2018. And now he advises to major international and local companies on regulatory compliance and project setup. So today, Timur will share with us his perspective on policy trends and their impact on the mining industry. Timur, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Let's begin from the background. Just a moment. So it was mentioned that in 2017, Kazakhstan reformed its mining legislation, which was based on the Western Australian regulatory approach. And from that time, we had four rounds of key amendments to the mining code. So I'd like just to show you the dynamics of the broader picture, dynamics to understand how the mining policy changed from that time. So in 2019, there was a reduction of the expenditures in annual minimum expenditures for the mining licenses. At that time, we understood that the total amount, annual amount, was very high, and because the mining area should have included the tailings and other areas, immediately a year after the government introduced the amendments. So that time there was demonstrating the understanding the whole situation. In 2018, the government started developing a new environmental code, and there was like a environmental agenda. In 2020, there was certain amendments to the mining codes, strengthening the rehabilitation and environmental matters, while adopting new environmental code. But as you know, we had some political events in 2022, And now we can see that from 2023, there was some amendments to the mining code that started erosion of the transitioning to CRISCO standards. That was a key element of our mining reform. The matter was that at that time, there started discussion in the parliament that we should disregard this transition and stay with the Soviet-era mining reporting standards. And why also at that time there was a discussion, because the 2023, it was like a last period of last year of transitional period from the old reporting standards to the new one. So the policy continued the making the rules more strict, and in 2024 the government introduced the export ban and licensing for certain raw materials, and tightening the penalties aimed at forcing local content and manufacturing. So from that time, it was like a big, clear signal reflecting a broader national strategy to ensure more value-added production with the country, first time demonstrating lack of stability of legislation. Currently, the parliament is considering new amendments to the mining code. And these upcoming changes are expected to be adopted by the end of this year, and strengthening responsibility for the illegal mining. So during the exploration period, and the responsibility for misrepresentation in reports and other statements and documents, including bidding procedures during the auction for the new mining assets. Now let's turn the next slide. So I can now trying to explain you to understand the reason what is happening in the mining policy of Kazakhstan. So from other hand, we observe like two key factors. So from one hand, we observed lack of competence. So there was a change in the policy-making generations and the public servants. We call it like institutional memory, and there was a big shift in the public staff. And from the other hand, we observe like a specific socio-political agenda, which is now in the parliament and in the government. So it is important to understand that the socio-political agenda is now observed throughout the all resource-rich countries in Asia, Africa, and South America. So, and these factors now is creating some pressure to policymakers, and what can now we observe in the market and in the policy decisions and the amendments into the mining code. So the first result is like we now observe that the government does not have the holistic strategic vision how to develop the sector further. So because the experience on introducing the export ban in a couple of years ago, so it should demonstrate it. Because at the beginning, when the government introduced that reform, there was no any discussions about some bans and licensing or about the export of raw materials. So what we also can observe is unpredictable and frequent changes into the legislation. As Daniel already mentioned, there is like uncertainty. So the investors cannot understand what will be the next from the parliament and from the government. The problem is that all these changes are not discussed with enough attention, with a reasonable attention with the mining industry and mining chambers and associations. The good example is the rates for the royalty. Nobody knows how the government calculated and came to that rates. And all this process and the social political agenda, which now we observe in other countries and in Kazakhstan, so is also driven by growth of resource nationalism and populism. Sometimes we can observe that the members of our parliament, they even do not understand what they are talking about when they represent some when they present some comments in mining policy. So and these factors, of course, creates a pressure and populism about the mandatory domestic discount sale and forcing processing. Even for the projects which cannot be processed, for example, in Kazakhstan. So we can, it is especially, it relates to the rare earth materials. We have only 3 or 4 plants which can process the specific rare earth materials, but other rare earth materials cannot be processed in Kazakhstan. We also observe that there are still discussions about the destiny of the CRISCO standards and its existence, because the amendments to the mining code that now is considered in the parliament, and during this year and from the beginning of the last year, we can see that some officials believe that these standards are leading to the situation when the government loses its control over the resources which now belong to the people of Kazakhstan. And of course, the situation leads to the increasing of the penalties for everything, for the environmental breaches and the penalties for the breaching the local content requirement, for the breaching procedures for the procurement procedures on the goods and services used in the mining operations, and other breaches. So, and as I already mentioned, the agenda, social political agenda, which was changed from 2022, looks to the mining sector and the situation with the extension of the oil and gas contracts, the major contracts, which was concluded by the government in 19th, actually creates like a picture that the investors not like a picture, but creates the situation when the voice of the industry, resource industry, is regarded during the even attempt to discuss some amendments in the parliament. The better situation in the government level, but Olga can prove that nobody would like to listen to any voice from the mining associations.
Oh, that's a difficult question. And I think if we would have more time for that, we should actually have a separate discussion on that, and should be separate, David, discussion on the which voices would be heard and how united we should be as industry and government in order to have the things changed. Sorry, Timur, I have to interrupt here because of the time.
Yeah, okay.
We got a couple of questions for you actually in the chat. So based on your view in a couple of words, what should be strategic vision look like, and what should be the priorities in your view?
Well, it is on the slide that I prepared for you about and recommendations. So I propose investors now focus on the prospect areas and obtaining the exploration licenses and grounds based on the competitive procedures, only auctions and first come first served regime, because other loopholes and that still can exist in the legislation, especially it relates to the mechanism which I believe is not transparent through the investment council, is not regulated by the law. It raises a lot of questions which can be reassessed in future if you find something really significant.
I think that's the worried thing, because you have to act then based on on case-to-case scenario. Like if you find something, then you need to find a way how to make sure that the project is operational and effective and gets implemented in country, which is not sustainable for junior companies, for example. Like if you don't have that background of those who will be helping you with stakeholder engagement, that could be a challenge. David, I know that we are running out of time. There are not that many questions in the chat at the moment, but there are some questions I have to panelists. I think I can address them separately, and if BKS would give us opportunity, then maybe in the social media when we'll be doing the post to answer some of the questions or address them. So I would then pause here, David, and over to you. Thank you very much, guys and gentlemen. That was wonderful discussion. I couldn't pause anyone earlier because that was too much important information. So you cannot just stop somewhere and saying that's enough for us to discuss. Sorry, Dave, for that. You're on mute.
Well, the synergy of the panel here with your moderation, Olga, was brilliant. So thank you so much to everyone, Timur, Dan, and Almat, and of course Assel, most appreciated. And also we should note Alijan in the background organizing the webinar, and Aida doing a great job interpreting in Almaty. Very quickly here. Finally, I'd just like to mention a couple of or a few BKS relevant events. We have three in the mining sphere early next year. One will be issues around mine closures, February the 26th, which relates to one of the items mentioned earlier. The UK government critical minerals report is due in the near future, and we hope to address its relevance to Kazakhstan on March the 12th, 2026. and mining copper is planned for late April. In addition, we have an in-person event which will be at Herbert Smith in London, an evening reception on December the 2nd, which is part of the London Arbitration Week. So please visit the website, see the further details of these events, and of course membership, which we strongly encourage. And thank you all for attending today, and look forward to seeing you at near future events. Keep safe. Take care. Bye now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.